Wild Wednesdays, sponsored by Jim Beam. The official bourbon of the Minnesota Wild are here all season long. Listen every Wednesday through March for your chance to win tickets.
Closed circuit, speaking of your Minnesota Wild, to KFAN. In typical insecure hockey fan fashion, his feelings are hurt that the hockey ambassador has not found time to celebrate the Minnesota Wild's gutty shootout victory over the Caps yesterday, despite the injuries, of course, mounting up. I might have tweeted back to him something like, get to the conference finals and then get back to me, something like that. On the other hand, if he cares, his team does get a lot of love on the Enough Said program tonight, which will be on at 10:05, they tell me, on Fox 9, an unusual time. Johnny Athletic fills in for Guardsy, and I give a lot of love to the Minnesota Wild in the wake of their victory last night and the early success, well, now more than early success through much of this season to this point, especially compared to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who had another one of those moral victory losses last night against an injury-ravaged Boston Celtics club. So watch TV tonight, Fallness, and you'll get your moment. Ben Goessling is with us now to continue what's largely been football, exclusivity here for all the obvious reasons. We are in a historic period where we're seeing a game anticipated like very few have in regular season Vikings history, maybe even National Football League history, given the records of the two teams and the stakes, which have all been well established by now. And so we'll continue on that thread with Mr. Goessling. He, of course, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Vikings fans should probably be relieved that you again picked the Vikings to win, because I think you've been right for the last several weeks. They will also be pleased because I picked the Vikings to lose again, and I picked them to lose to Green Bay, and that turned out pretty good for the Purple. And I again picked the Lions to get the job done at home. You like, in I think again another close game, the Vikings to do it. Give me, if you're ranking the prerequisites that will end making you look good with a Vikings victory, what would be at the very top of the list for you?
I think a lot of it is limiting the turnovers that they've had in a lot of these games against the Lions recently, because they've had their chances to beat them, but have not been able to do it in part because of all of the giveaways. And now the ones last year are with Nick Mullins at quarterback. And I think, the first one this time that let the Lions back into this game. But if they can handle the turnover thing, if they can keep from turning the ball over the way that they have for the large part in the last few weeks, I think they have a much better chance. I think that's a lot of it. I think this is a team that does good work trying to make things happen off of turnovers. They kind of made their comeback in that first game in part because of that. They go forward a lot on fourth down. They run in unorthodox situations, as the Vikings have learned, and they're just a hard team to keep out of games. And I think especially on the road, not turning the ball over is going to be a lot of this thing, because the Lions have a lot of ways to attack, and the Vikings learned that the first time. I think they can't really give them many opportunities to get extra possessions if they want to come out with this one.
Yeah, that's fair. And, one of the interesting things is obviously the Vikings have been, I think we're number one in the league in interceptions. We're top, is it 3 or top 5 certainly in takeaways in general. Against Detroit, we've not been all that successful in the 3 B-flow games. I think we've got, is it 2 takeaways in the 3 games, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. So where does that enter into it? You mentioned the Vikings not turning the ball over. What about the ability to take the ball away? How key is that to you?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big component of this, because Jared Goff has not been I think he's thrown 10 or 11 interceptions this year, but he's done a good job for the most part of taking care of the ball. That fumble return for Ivan Pace in that first game really helped the Vikings come back and have a chance to take that first game away from the Lions. They will have to do, I think, some of that. This is one of those games that it's every possession is going to matter. So if you can steal an extra one, I think it's going to help quite a bit. Goff has been awfully good. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league for a lot of the season. And he's shown that if they can protect him with that line, which typically does a pretty good job of it, he's going to be hard to shut down. So a lot of this, I think, comes down to being on the right side of that turnover battle. I think with these two offenses playing as well as they are, you just can't be on the wrong side of it, giving away possessions, because both of these teams are pretty good at making you pay when you do that.
I was talking with Sean Salisbury earlier, and he was suggesting that, look, all he wants from the Vikings defense is maybe convincing Detroit to be stopped on a pair of 3-and-outs. And a couple of people texted and said, you mean 4-and-outs, right? Because there's no such thing necessarily. I think Seifert told me yesterday that our fourth down success rate in terms of stopping the other team and converting is very good with this defense. And you can maybe speak to that, and because it may well be a factor here, knowing the pattern that the Lions tend to follow because of the aggressiveness of their head coach. It may well come down to a couple of those fourth downs as well.
Yeah, it certainly could. They are, in fact, number one in the league in terms of their fourth down stop rate. The Vikings defense is, and they're fourth in third downs. So they've been pretty good at getting teams in situations where they're either coming off the field or deciding to go for it on fourth down. And when they have been tested on fourth down, they've done a good job stopping it. We've seen that in a number of these games where teams decide to go for it, and those effectively turn into turnovers in a lot of ways. But yeah, the Lions are aggressive with it as anybody in the NFL, and I do think that's part of the reason they become difficult to stop. Is it's not just the big plays that they try to generate, or the kind of the trick plays that they'll run at times, whether it's a fake punt or just different things from the line of scrimmage. It's the cumulative effect of it, because this is a line that is physical. It's a line that is experienced, and they just force you to defend for a lot more plays than you would typically have to do it. You're not sitting there saying, hey, if we get a stop on third down, we're coming off the field. You do typically have to come back one more time, and they have shown they're able to run the ball in a lot of those situations. They've shown that they can pick on you over the middle of the field too. So I do think that's a big factor, how aggressive they are on fourth downs, and they've been awfully good at getting them. But this is going to be one of those things I think that tips this game too, is that the Lions are willing to do it. The Vikings have shown they can stop it. Who comes out on the better end of it? This is probably one of those games that comes down to one or two decisions like that, and whoever makes the right call or makes the right set of execution moves, I think, is going to come out on top here.
All right, let's squeeze in a very quick pause, and then we'll get a couple minutes on the back end of this break as we wrap up the show. Vikings, I should say, Gopher pregame show heading into the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina. Will take over at the bottom of the 4 o'clock hour. It's the rap music now because we're wrapping things up. It's one of the shorter shows in recent memory. Vikings, I should say Golden Gophers pregame show will begin at the bottom of the hour. Want to thank Sean Salisbury, who joined us early. Want to thank Carl Gerbschmidt, Ben Goessling, who's back with us now, actually picked the Vikings to knock off the Detroit Lions. He has rarely been as kind to the hated Vikings as he was today.
Yeah, I heard it. He picked them. I think you guys picked the Lions, and then he called me a homer.
Yes, he did. I don't know where that cast it.
I mean, lately it's been right, Carl. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you, including against your team last week. But, yeah, I hate to break it to you. I'm picking him again. I guess he and I agree on this one.
Yeah, who knows? Great minds apparently do occasionally think alike. Do we have to worry at all about our place kicker?
I mean, it's a question with the Vikings, I suppose, always. And the fact that he missed a couple last week and really should have missed 3, if not for that offsides penalty that I'm sure Carl has held up as evidence of the refs being out to get the Packers. But, I don't think so. I think a lot of it was he talked about kind of technique issues that he felt pretty clear about what he needed to do to change it. But, it's always one of those things when it starts, it's hard to ignore it. I think there's certainly plenty of evidence in Vikings history of that, but I don't think there's any lingering concerns about the injury stuff coming back to affect him. If there's any thought of that quadriceps injury that might be leading to any of these misses, I don't think it's that, but yeah, until he makes a couple, especially in big spots, I'm sure people are going to be a little bit worried about it.
What do we do more, blitz or show blitz?
Against Jared Goff or just in general?
Against Jared Goff and the Lions, yep.
I think you probably have to show it as much as you send it, because he has been affected by pressure, but this is also a team that has so many ways to attack you that if you commit extra guys, you're not always guaranteed to get home. And this line has enough. I mean, their tackles are as good as it gets in the NFL. And then, they're solid up the middle, too, with Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler. So I think a lot of this probably becomes trying to show pressure and hope that they make the wrong decisions in pass protection. And then you get hopefully some free runners from the Vikings perspective that way. But they didn't come after him a whole lot in that first game. It was more of the drop 8 kind of stuff. Now, they did not have Blake Cashman in that first game, and I do think that changes what they want to do. But I expect you'll see quite a few times where they'll show it and then drop into coverage to make the Lions try to guess at where it's coming from.
Lions pass rush has been pretty feeble, I believe, for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Are they averaging barely one sack a game?
Yep.
My assumption is they will blitz a lot on the basis of we almost have to, even if that might make them further vulnerable on the back end. What do we expect in terms of the level of aggressiveness from the Lions front?
Yeah, I think they'll probably try to heat Sam Darnold up and see if the Vikings know how to kind of handle all of the looks. And the Vikings have done a better job of that in the last couple of weeks. I think we've seen some moments where their pass protection has struggled with extra rushers in terms of where the back is supposed to pick somebody up and who's passing off what. But they did a better job of that against the Packers, and I think that's probably something the Lions will try to test and see if they can get anything on the Vikings that way in terms of free runners. I mean, Zadarius Smith, old Viking, former Packer, has kind of become the pass rushing specialist coming off the blind side, but has not been anywhere near as effective as you would have expected with Aiden Hutchinson or Alan McNeil. I mean, those losses have just been hard for the Lions to overcome. So I think they'll probably bring pressure. That does leave them vulnerable because this is a secondary that the Vikings have been able to pick on. No Carlton Davis too. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing there, but I would think that they'll try it and probably try to be aggressive with the receivers to throw off timing in the process. But then it's a question of how much do they get called on? And I think Seifert pointed this out too, that this is a crew that throws some flags. So that could be a factor as well.
Yeah, good point. Do we have any idea how many Vikings fans we like to get those percentages? Do we think it's going to be a decent Vikings crowd, like as much as the Packers? I think it was like 20-25%. What are we expecting in Detroit?
I haven't seen the percentages this week, but generally it's been one of those that you've seen fans get tickets, and that may have been something that had to happen earlier in the year in terms of people snapping them up before everybody knew what this game had become. Obviously, it's an easy flight. It's Delta Hub to Delta Hub, so people can do it. I think we've typically in the past seen a decent number of Vikings fans there, and they travel so well, I would expect to see some of that. But that Lions crowd's going to be fired up. I mean, this would be the first time I think the Lions have had home field, and I don't even know the last time. Home field advantage may not have been a concept the last time the Lions had this.
Yeah.
So this one, I think you're going to see that crowd, that Lions crowd is going to make itself heard early and often. So even if there are Vikings fans there, it's going to be, I think, a pretty hostile environment the Vikings will have to manage if they want to come out on top of this one.
And this would be Vikings home field advantage this would be their first time since 98, correct?
Correct. Yes, if they win, it's first time since the famous 98 season.
We appreciate the time as always. Good luck. Have fun in Detroit over the weekend, and we'll talk next week.
All right, sounds good. Should be a fun one. Thanks,
absolutely. Ben Goessling, Standard Heating and Air Conditioning, has sponsored his fine segment throughout this season and into, we assume and hope, the postseason as well. Spinners music, a little earlier than usual. Yeah, it's not even 4:30, but we're playing it because we're out at the bottom of this hour. The Golden Gophers, the fan has learned, are playing in a bowl game. The Duke's Mayo Bowl, I believe, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And all of the coverage of said game is going to follow us beginning at 4:30, opening kickoff sometime around 6:30-ish or so. Sunday sermons, obviously a 2-hour tour with the Vikings game moved to prime time. Robert Smith, part 2 with him among our guests on Sunday. We're very much looking forward to that broadcast. It might include a couple of other outstanding football-related guests. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the game Sunday night, but we'll talk Sunday morning beginning at 9 o'clock right here on The Fan.